now at some different chord types. Most of these will be familiar to you from higher and Nat 5, maybe one or two are new. So, as you know, major chords. Major chords are C, F, G. Sometimes we call them triads. They're built on a root note. There's 3 notes in a basic chord, hence triad. But how do we make a minor chord? First of all, we would take a major triad, 3 notes. This is the C major chord. And we would flatten the third. The third's the middle note, remember, because it's the third step of the scale. So flatten the third, in other words, reduce it by a semitone, as you can see here. We just made that E into an E flat. And that gives us the chord of C minor. So to make a minor chord, we take the basic major triad and we flatten the third. We make it lowered by a semitone, and that gives us the minor chord. Okay, so looking at the chord of F minor, how do we find that? So we take the chord of F major, we're looking for the third, that's the middle note. We flatten that third to give us an A flat, and that gives us the chord of F minor. We'll look for the chord of G minor, same idea, we take the chord of G major, we're looking at the third, that's the note in the middle there, the B. I'm going to flatten that note, reduce it by a semitone in other words, to give us a B flat. And those 3 notes there, G, B flat, D, they form the chord of G minor. Diminished chord. So how do we make a diminished chord? First of all, we take the major triad as before. This is the major triad of C, as you know. And we flatten both the third and the fifth. So we flatten the E, we flatten the G. Gives us this. And that's the chord of C diminished. Remember that diminished means to make smaller, and we've made these intervals smaller between a C and an E. We've made it a C and an E flat. Between a C and a G, we've made it a C and a B flat. So that's the idea of diminished. We're talking about the intervals between the notes of the chord. So let's have a go at finding the chord of F diminished. So as before, take the major chord. Here's the major chord of F major. F, A and C. We flatten the third and the fifth. So that's the third here, the A flat. And we flatten the fifth as well to make C flat. And that gives us the chord of F diminished. Those 3 notes there make the chord of F diminished. Applying that same principle to find the chord of G diminished. Again, we would take the chord of G major. There's a chord of G major with the notes G, B, D. And as you know now, we flatten the third and the fifth to give us B flat, D flat, and that's the chord of G diminished. What is a diminished 7th chord? We've seen before, this is the chord of C diminished. Remember, we arrived at that by taking the major triad, flattening the third, flattening the fifth to give us this, C diminished. As this might imply, there's another note is going to be added to make it a diminished 7th. Here's the same thing applied to the chord of F diminished and G diminished. Same idea. We've flattened the third, we've flattened the fifth, flattened the third, flattened the fifth. You may notice that a diminished triad consists of 3 notes which are 3 semitones apart. So between C and E flat, 3 semitones. Between E flat and G flat, 3 semitones. If we want to make a diminished seventh, a 4-note chord, we carry on with that process and we add a 4th note which is 3 semitones away from the previous one. So here we are with a C, E flat, G flat there, and this note here, B double flat, which is actually an A. But in this context, because it's a 7th chord, the A actually becomes a B double flat. Such things do exist. So there's B, there's a B flat, there's a B double flat. Now this is complicated. You might think, why go to all that trouble of calling it a B double flat instead of just calling it an A? Remember, if it's a 7th, there must be 7 letter names involved. C, D, E, F, G, A, B. There's got to be a 7th. There's got to be 7 notes. If it was A, it would be something 6th, because there's only 6 letter names involved there. So from a C to a B is 7 steps. 7 steps if we make it B flat. Still, theoretically, 7 steps if we make it B double flat. So that's a wee bit confusing, but that's the reasoning behind that. Some people get confused that the top note is an A. So why isn't it a 6th? But if we call the top note a B double flat, it really is a 7th. Again, if we apply the same principle to the F diminished 7th and the G diminished 7th, that's what they look like. And remember, we're stacking up 4 notes which are 3 semitones away from each other, or a minor third we sometimes call that. So F diminished 7th is an F, an A flat, a C flat, which as you know is a B, and an E double flat, which as you know is a D. G diminished 7th, uses a G, a B flat, a D flat, and an F double flat, which is an E flat really. Same note anyway as an E flat. So there's the F, that would be F flat, that would be F double flat. If you look at a diminished 7th chord, it will have a lot of sharps or flats in it like this, like that. How about a dominant 7th chord? So we've seen that this is the chord of C major, F major, G major. And again, as this might imply, another note's added to that basic triad to make it a 4-note chord. So you take the major chord, the major triad of C in this case, and because it says 7, we're looking for something that's 7 steps away from C. So we're looking at the 7th note here, which is a B. When we get to that B, we flatten it. We reduce it by a semitone to make it a B flat. And we add that note to the basic chord. And it gives us this. the chord of C dominant 7th, or sometimes you'll just see it written as C7. Applying the same principle then to find F7 or F dominant 7th, we take the basic major triad of F. We look at the major scale of F, identify the 7th note, and flatten that 7th note to get an E flat. Add that to the basic triad, gives us the chord of F dominant 7th or F7. Applying the same principle to find the chord of G7 or G dominant 7. Take the basic triad of G, we're going to add to that a note which is 7 steps away from the G. In this case it's an F. You think about the scale of G, it would be G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. We're going to take the 7th step here, flatten it to make an F, and that gives us the chord of G dominant 7 or G7. Added 6th chord. You'll be starting to understand by now that the 6 applies to the number of steps away from the root. So that's what the numbers are about in chords. It's a basic triad, and if it says 6 after it, it's 6. You add to that a note which is 6 steps away or 7 steps away. So for example, to make an added 6th chord, we take the major triad, in this case C, and simply we add a note to that which is 6 steps away from the lowest note. If you think of the lowest note being C here, C, D, E, F, G, A is 6 steps away from C. And that gives us the chord of C added 6th or just C6. Same idea on F. Here's the basic triad of F. So to find this F6 chord, we're looking to add to that a note which is 6 steps away from the lowest note. That would be the D, and that would give us the chord of F added 6th or F6. Apply that same principle to find the chord of G6. Apply that same principle to find the chord of G6. Take the major triad of G, add to it the note which is 6 steps away from the lowest note here. We would get that note there, which is an E. 4-note chord. That's the chord of G added 6th or just G6. Finally, an augmented triad. Remember earlier on we spoke about diminished meaning lower, to lower or to lessen something. Augmented is the opposite of this. If you augment something, you make it bigger. So, triad consists of 3 notes. How do we make an augmented triad? Well, we take the major triad, in this case we're looking at the major triad of C. Now we're going to augment one of these intervals. In other words, the distance between that and that, or this and this. And in this case it's the 5th, which we're going to increase by a semitone to give us a G sharp, and that gives us the chord of C augmented. Apply the same principle to find F augmented. There's the major triad of F. Remember, we're going to raise the 5th by a semitone, we're going to augment that. And that gives us the chord of F augmented. You can see that we've taken the 5th there, which is a C, and we've made it a C sharp. We've raised it by a semitone. G augmented. Same idea, we take the major triad of G, and we raise the fifth by a semitone. Here's the fifth, it's a D. We raise that to make it a D sharp. That gives us the chord of G augmented.